All right, and welcome back to Era 3 of APUS History. In this video, we will be looking at Topic 3.6, the influence of revolutionary ideals, and how those ideals were reflected in new beliefs about politics, religion, and society, both here in America and around the world. One of the most significant effects of the Revolution was the throwing off of the monarchy and the idea of hereditary leadership. All aristocratic titles were abolished, and laws affecting inheritance no longer required the eldest son to be the sole beneficiary of an estate. It was still a trend for the oldest son to inherit more than the spouse or younger children, but it was no longer mandated by law. And people who died without a will would have their estates divided equally amongst all their children, with widows usually entitled to a 1/3 share or their dowry in many states. Tax-supported churches were also phased out, with the U.S. adopting the idea that no one faith was better than another, so religion was kept out of the public sphere, at least in terms of granting favorites. A few states, particularly in New England, hung on to the practice longer than others, but with an interest in expanding democracy and voter participation in the 1820s and 1830s, tax-supported churches ended there too. Women had participated in the American Revolution in various ways, including maintaining homes, farms, and businesses, while men were away fighting. They were particularly vital to the success of boycotts, as many oversaw the purchase of goods for their homes. They generated supplies for the army and militias, providing food, clothing, and even made bullets. Some served as spies, gathering intelligence that could be passed along to the army. Some accompanied soldiers on campaign, cooking, cleaning, and nursing injuries in various camps. Some stepped up and filled in when male soldiers fell, manning artillery at various battles, including Margaret Corbin at the Battle of Fort Washington. Some even served as regular soldiers by disguising themselves, like Deborah Sampson, who served in New York, and her gender identity was only discovered when she fell ill and was examined by a doctor. George Washington once complained in 1777 that the multitude of women in particular are a clog upon every movement. But he knew that the soldiers would desert without them, and that their labor was necessary. Some of these women later applied for pensions, and some received them as well. With the influence of the Enlightenment, women were becoming increasingly aware of their place within society, and began to argue that unlimited power in the hands of husbands was as bad as unlimited power in the hands of a king. Abigail Adams, wife of John Adams, even implored her husband in a letter to remember the ladies and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors. Still, women were left out of government participation, both under the Articles of Confederation and under the Constitution. But they were encouraged to raise their children, especially their sons, to be patriotic and virtuous citizens of the Republic, a concept known as Republican motherhood. Therefore, women were essentially given an honored place in society, but it centered on the home and the family, with men dominating business and politics. Of course, to fulfill this role, women would need access to education and intellectual development, if only to pass this on to their sons. And the issue of slavery also brought about much discussion and division. In keeping with the ideals of the Declaration of Independence, some Americans began to manumit their slaves, and many of the northern states passed gradual emancipation laws, abolishing slavery as they wrote their constitutions or shortly thereafter. In contrast, the invention of the cotton gin not long after the war and Southern reliance on cash crops and slave labor will mean that slavery will expand in the South. During the war, the British were the first to recruit black regiments, beginning in 1775, when British Royal Governor of Virginia, John Murray, the 4th Earl of Dunmore, promised freedom to any slaves or indentured servants who would escape their masters and join the British cause. At first, George Washington, a slaveholder himself, resisted allowing free blacks and former slaves to join the Continental Army, but even he eventually relented. At the war's conclusion, thousands of Loyalist former slaves fled with the British Army, hoping that the British government would uphold the promises of freedom that they had made and establish new homes elsewhere within the British Empire. Although the Treaty of Paris demanded that British troops leave runaway slaves behind, many of the British military commanders upheld those earlier promises and evacuated thousands of freedmen, transporting them to Canada, the Caribbean, or even Great Britain itself. The American Revolution and its ideals also inspired other revolutionary movements throughout the world. First is the French Revolution, which began in 1789 over issues related to the abuse of the monarchy by the monarchy towards the people and the corruption of the aristocracy. The new French National Assembly, which was what the people created what they called the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen, and it was deeply influenced by the Declaration of Independence and included protections of basic human rights and provided for a much more limited monarchy. Then there was the Haitian Revolution, which began in 1791. Haiti was a French colony, and as the population of the island, of which a majority were enslaved, heard of the French revolutionaries' demand for freedom, they rose up in revolution against their owners. A Haitian named Toussaint L'Ouverture led this rebellion against the French in Haiti, and much like the American Revolution, it shocked the world when the Haitians claimed victory against the French and established an independent Haitian government. Theirs was the first successful revolution of enslaved people and the first black-led independent nation in the Western Hemisphere. In Central and South America, Latin American countries began rebelling against Spain and Portugal, and when it was all over, countries like Mexico, Peru, Venezuela, and Chile had all overthrown their former colonizers. All of these now independent countries could then begin to form political and trade relationships with any country they chose, and the United States was more than willing to become a trading partner and to extend diplomatic recognition to these former European colonies. And so that covers what you need to know about Topic 6, the influence of American revolutionary ideals, both at home and abroad.